Hey, good catch.
Better to catch it early. Hello, welcome. There we go. I think it went into my headphone mic, so there's no mic on here, so good luck with that one. Welcome. Thank you for joining us back for another episode of Two and a Half Talent. Actually, you are guys, mics are going through, so that is all good. We are back. We've got a few things to discuss. It's been a little while since we've done one of these, and there's been a couple of tournaments that have happened and a couple that are going to happen as well. So no better time to do an episode like this. We're going to keep it relatively brief, around like an hour and a half is sort of what we're going to aim for, and we'll see how we go from there. But of course, as per, joined by none other than Trav and Paladin for this one. Fellas, as we always do, we start with what have we been up to? Trav, you want to kickstart us? What has been, I want to say like, what, 3 weeks maybe? Oh no, I think the last one we did with actually us three was prior to Christmas. We did one episode
hmm
with Elfish Guy, but what have you done, Trav, in the last like month since we did our last episode with Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think was it pre-HLTV Awards or just after we did the episode with Jordan?
I
Do you
want to say
remember?
pre, I think it was pre because
Yeah,
Paladin, you were still home for Christmas, so I think it
Yep.
was actually pre.
yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, so yeah, HLTV Awards was amazing. It's always great to see everyone at the end of the year celebrate the year, and it was my best year as a commentator, 2024. I think same can be said for a lot of us. Like, there's just so much work was in 2024. And yeah, it was great to celebrate that. Then, of course, more recently, just covering occasional qualifiers, did some decent co-streams recently. Kato co-streams went quite well. Feel like I'm growing my brand a little bit, which is fun. And then I've been obviously covering the Dallas quals, like all of us have in various regions. And that was super fun as well. I think it was Astralis Bet Boom I did last night. That got reached about 30K viewers, pretty good for that sort of a game.
Nice.
And yeah, I think in general with Katowice, which we'll get onto obviously, viewership is going up. I feel like viewership is at an all-time
hmm
high for Counter Strike, so it can only be good for the professional scene. And yeah, I'm quite happy with how things are going. And of course, me and Nia went to watch Kato, watched the finals in person, a
Hmm.
little esports news UK watch party thing in London as well, which was a cool little idea and always enjoyable.
Yeah, and I want a giveaway, so I'm very happy there. Paladin,
Of
what about
course.
you, mate? What have you been up to? For you, this will be since prior to Christmas. So I guess how was
Yeah.
Christmas, and what have you been doing since?
Yeah, Christmas was great. I mean, obviously, I've moved to a new city for grad school and haven't been away from home for that long. It's like kind of truly like the first time where like I'm out of the nest a little bit.
Hmm.
So I was itching to go back, and that's why I stayed for a little bit longer and why I wasn't back like doing content and stuff. I just wanted to be with family, and
Sure.
honestly, it was really nice. Um, I love Houston in the sense that it's a lot of stuff that is familiar to me, and so just seeing old friends, seeing old places was nice. But yeah, came back, enjoyed Philly as well. School's going okay. Casts have been pretty solid. The blast qualifiers were actually pretty entertaining. I have another one tomorrow, and then we had Dallas quals yesterday, so it's pretty busy where we got all the qualifiers kind of bunched into one area. But yeah, can't really complain. I mean, we'll complain a little bit, but that'll come later. But yeah, overall, pretty happy with things. We had the Super Bowl like last weekend, and
Go birds.
obviously, if yeah, go birds, obviously. And since I'm in Philly, like the celebrations here were really awesome. So
Well, people
being
just
here for
out in the
that was
street,
a lot of fun.
like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Did you see
All
it's
any
pretty
those
cool.
heinous crimes getting committed of people like tearing down lampposts?
Yeah, there was plenty of stuff. There was a guy that like was driving his Jeep on the sidewalk like while the whole street was crowded. A friend of mine nearly got ran over.
Oh
That
dear.
was fun. Some guy put a girl in a headlock for I don't know what reason.
Like
And
he
Cole
knew her
and
or no?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And Cole had to break that up like a real peace officer, and he did very
My
successfully. It was
superhero.
incredible.
I
It was
listened to Cole.
incredible.
I listened to Cole.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
like all love, and like gave him his hat back, and it was just like it was like a movie. It was incredible. You could
Yeah.
ask him all about it, but yeah, every stupid thing that you can think of, people dancing on cars, people jumping on cars like they're like a kid, but they're like 35 years old.
Jesus.
That was incredible.
I always wonder,
But
like, do
yeah,
people, people who like, tear down the lampposts or like jumping on
yeah.
like other people's cars and stuff, do they ever actually get in trouble for it? Because obviously there's so much footage
No,
of
there
it, but I feel like people just can't
you
be
can't
asked.
catch these people because there's just so many people and there's so
Yeah.
little like police officers. Like there's plenty of police officers there, but
Mm.
like from what I saw, like when you're like standing there close up to them, you can't like they don't really like.
Yeah, they kind of
react to
know.
anything. They just see all this shit happening and they just don't do anything, which is
Yeah.
like, it is what it is. As long as they're not like actually committing acts of terrorism, I think it's fine in their mind.
Yeah.
Like so, yeah, it is what it is. But it's a fun time.
I feel like the cities sort of expect like shit's gonna be like loose if
Yeah,
you win. It's
yeah,
just how it is, really. So,
yeah.
yeah, that sounds fun. For me, same kind of things you guys were mentioning was HTV Awards. Great fun, great time always. Kind of with the guys, we had a funny time as a whole. We're only there for like a few days, but it's always a kind of a good time to see everybody, especially because when you work events, even though like some of the EU guys that we'll see like more regularly, sometimes you're just not on the same events as them. So like some of them I haven't seen since last year's awards. So it's good. It's like a nice catch up with people that you maybe haven't seen in a while. That's always fun. We had a nice Airbnb with like 10 of us or whatever, and it was good.
That was cool.
It was a cool time. And in Serbia, we had like a really nice meal on the last night as well, like a Michelin star, but it wasn't Michelin prices, which was really sick.
Mm.
And then
It was
yeah, like
Serbia prices.
it's over,
Yeah.
exactly. And then yeah, of course, qualifier season is what we've been in. So yeah, Dallas quals, I did the blast, EU quals with Rez. That was good fun. We just had 2 quick days of that. Nothing really. I don't think it was too many like real upsets in that one. It was pretty bog standard as they go, but some good games nonetheless. And then like today I've been doing some CCT, hence why the green screen is up. But yeah, online work is kind of, I think, thankfully starting to pick up, which is good. I mean, obviously always in January it's very, very quiet and you're kind of left like you're a little bit like tentative of what the year's gonna look like.
Yeah.
But you know, the second it hits February, stuff starts picking up and it all starts to get good. And there's started to be sort of lands get announced sort of here and there. So who knows what the year's gonna bring. But good time we can discuss of what has happened, and we think good time as ever to start with I Am Kato, which just concluded all of a kind of a not too long ago, and I think the big thing for me is that first of all we saw a UK CS player win, so I'm a happy man. But I think in general, it's the big thing for me is that it was actually a really interesting tournament all the way throughout. The play-ins actually had some quite cool moments, good viewership over there. Trav, you touched on it as well. That final was the most viewed final that's not a major. I'm right in saying
Think
that was
so.
what they were saying. It was like 1.3
Yeah.
million was basically what they had, which is good to see. You know, CS is still growing no matter which way you want to kind of look at it. Vitality ended up, of course, finishing first with win over Spirit and a dominant win at that as well, which I think was, for most people, just a big surprise in the sense of everybody came in as sort of, even if, we know Vitality very good, it was expected that we were going to see at least a close game, and it was just a no-show from Spirit, and a rare no-show in a very important sort of moment for them. So, all in all, big fan of the final. Wish it actually had gone to train, to be perfectly honest, on that map number 4. That would have been cool.
Yeah.
Like, training a grand final for the first time, but we'll have to wait for that one. The other one that I wanted to bring up, I'm just super impressed with the Mongols. I think, I love to see these guys getting these sort of top 4 finishes. That is awesome to see, with the big boys of Navis. And I think for them, it's huge, right? It's continuing to prove just how good Asian Counter-Strike is getting.
Yeah, I think for them it's like I want them to make these kinds of playoffs regularly so
Yep.
they can finally kind of break through the top 5 a little bit more consistently, because that best of 3 was against Vitality was definitely like a game of catch up, which it was kind of to be expected. I honestly argue that even if Eternal Fire were there, you'd probably have the same result, just because
Yeah.
there were serious nerves from both of those teams on stage. And I think it's been a while since we've had a new team make the playoffs and like actually show nerves.
Yeah.
I feel like even when Spirit were there, like Kato last year, they kind of breezed through, and Donk just looked unstoppable. And that kind of stuff we should realize that stuff is an outlier. It's not
Yeah.
the norm, and that for a lot of these teams, it's gonna take some time, and even for teams like VP with like obviously like Flamus didn't play, but players like Icy, who have never really been at that stage, have to kind of go through a trial by fire and play against Spirit, who are now, I'd argue, a year later, seasoned veterans on this stage with how much they've improved. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
thinking about how much Zontix has improved individually. Magix as well is now turning into a big game player, which is really cool. Of course, the final didn't go as planned, but I think we could talk about Vitality a little bit, because oh my goodness, like this team is just like it's incredible to see the kind of development that they've had. Because I mean, the worry in the previous season was they couldn't get over the grand final hump. They only had Cologne to their name even after they made the number of finals that they did. But adding in Rops, sure, you know, you look at a numbers perspective, he looks better, but I think as a team, these guys look just so much more well coordinated. Mezzi looks so much better. I think as an anchor, and I think he just feels a lot more comfortable in this team. It really makes you think what kind of importance mentality does for a team, and not having Spinks on this roster anymore did for their kind of confidence. So yeah, I'm really excited for this team, and I hope that we can get this like Vitality Spirit, Vitality Navi type final
Yeah.
again in the near future.
Yeah, Spinks is not beating the allegations, I don't think, after they've
Mm-mm.
immediately won an event without him. But yeah,
Yeah.
you know, Kato's was kind of a weird event because I think the group stage, you know, and stage two, I think it's fair to call it, had some absolute giga bangers. I mean, the Eternal
That's
Fire
true.
phase map, 25-22, unbelievable game. Even that Vitality phase game in the upper bracket semis was insane. Went to that third map, double OT. But the playoffs overall kind of disappointed.
Oh,
Sadly, not
G2
a
Falcons.
single. Yeah,
Can't
G2
forget
Falcons
about
as
that.
well.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, I completely agree. Actually, that Magist clutch,
Hmm.
right? But yeah, like you know, every single playoff game didn't have a single team getting another map right. It was 2-0s or 3-0 across the board. Sadly, so
Hmm.
the playoffs were disappointing, and that is a shame because obviously there are, you know, talks around the scene right now. Are they going to go to Kato again? You know, ESL/IEM. Are they going to actually get another Katowice next year? You know, the rumors are that it's not going to be the case. So if that's the way Kato ends, it's, you know, amazing for Vitality and especially Apex to get a Kato
Finally,
under his
right?
belt
Yeah.
finally after all these years of trying, what could be the last the last time of asking. So yeah, I think overall the event read like I thought it would be as well. I think you know, I came into the event thinking Vitality Spirit final. Vitality looked the best out of all the bigger teams that had made moves. You know, G2 still have their issues with you know, Heavy God and integrating him into the fold without having Nico in the team. You have Navi, who are always going to be there, but still are missing that little bit of extra to get over the line. Despite beating Spirit in the event, when it actually came to the nitty gritty in the playoff game, they couldn't get it over the line. Um, and also, actually, I think the Mongols and Eternal Fire, where they placed, also reads accurately, right? Like,
I agree.
Eternal Fire made playoffs again. They sort of built on what they showed at the Bounty. But because Mongols didn't play the Bounty, everyone in esports has like a short memory, right? Recency bias is very evident in many, many scenarios. We kind of forgot, oh, Mongols are there, aren't they? They're actually
Yeah.
better than Eternal Fire and should be better than them. They made the semis, but still that gap between them, Vitality, Spirit. So I think everything read as I expected in a weird way, but just not the final scoreline. The 3-0 for Vitality was unreal, and I will echo what Paladin said. I think you know, Zaiwu, that is a really impressive performance from him. Lots of criticism about him going missing in big event playoff
Yeah.
games. He was superb. He got the MVP, rightfully so. And every single player on the team is doing their job perfectly. And with, you know, Rops integrating in so well, he's a big game player. And
Yeah.
already he's made a big difference for
Yeah,
Vitality.
exactly. I think, you know, the fact that he stepped up immediately and towards this lineup and made it look so easy, I think, for Ops, I think it is credit where it's due, right? I mean, especially those first two maps were non-existent performances from Spirit, which you just hate to see, right? You know, even, you know, looking at the rating now, Donk 0.88 for the final is tough. Their best player, best rated player, Zontix 0.89. So, you know, it was just a complete systemic shutdown of Spirit,
Yeah.
and I think credit to Vitality. They obviously the hard yards, and it was a very good tournament all in all for them. If you just look at the not the play-ins, but obviously like with them in that playoffs, they only dropped one map the entire tournament to phase. It's a pretty good run. I mean, there's no doubt they deserve that one. Where at least, you know, Spirit, they picked up that loss earlier in the kind of the tournament in Na'Vi, and they had to make a little bit of a lower bracket run, even dropping them up to Gamer Legion in that lower final too. So you can still see there was bits of errors kind of here and there for that Spirit side. I think the Vitality, strongest team of the day and the tournament, and proved this. So sick for me. I think it's a good time as well to touch on sort of, I always like to do the overperformers and underperformers. And for the overperformers, it's quite hard to actually put in this spot. I would probably, the only one that really rings a bell for me would be VP, just because of a new team,
Yeah.
right? I think new team, new system, you know, new IGL, or in a way, new coach and a new kind of like system around them with new players coming through. We all kind of spoke about kind of, you know, Icy and Flammus being integrated in towards this team. It's big step ups for them. And I think to make it to the quarters, I think was actually quite impressive. Obviously, it's unfortunate that in the end, because the visa thing, which first of all must touch on, kind of stupid. If you're gonna get a visa, at least make sure it lasts to the end of the tournament. Don't have to have Mir in for the playoffs. So is that maybe an indication a little bit that VP didn't expect to make it to the playoffs? Who knows? But it obviously came back to bite them a little bit with Mir. But in terms of underperformances, I think G2 is not a bad shout. I think, but obviously they're going to go through teething issues kind of in that minus Nico. Maybe you could talk about FaZe a little bit as well, but then that Vitality matchup's always going to be super difficult as well. So it's hard to really kind of pin any distinct under or over performers, because I feel like you touched on, Mongols and Eternal Fire, for me, this actually feels very deserving. I think Mongols they've been proving that they're a playoff level team at a bare minimum. And they can actually make deep runs in tournaments, and they're not like this ranking of them being anywhere in or around that 5th in the world isn't like a mistake, and it isn't the VRS ranking failing, in my opinion. At least they are a deserved at least top kind of 7 team, if not even higher. I would even say deservedly kind of being in that top 5 position. And now they've got a ton of fire also top 5 as well. First time this roster's ever been top 5 as well. It's pretty sick, right? You know, real Eternal Fire fans remember minus major plus major 16 times, right? So I think you know, they've had to go through some hard times with this team, and getting performances that are Woxic and not having it all on the shoulders of Xantares. But the Jota
Woxic
edition
is the best trained player in the world. Isn't that crazy?
Exactly. And you know, this addition of Jota, who, you know, us as tier 2 knowers knew it was always going to be good, but I think he had to kind of prove it to the general crowd, and obviously did. I liked what I saw from him. I think he looked really, really solid. So I'm, in terms of who I put as an overperformer or underperformer, I think it's quite difficult, because most things feel like they played us maybe as expected. I would say potentially like kind of bar VP. I expected VP to have teething issues in their first kind of big LAN tournament, but they actually look really good.
Yeah, I completely agree. For VP, I think that honestly the upgrades on paper just look good, but there's still a lot of work to be done. It's clear that they're just not at that like class yet, but I think they're back to square one when you think about it. It's a team that can qualify for playoffs regularly and try to go toe to toe with the top 5 teams. But now it's the question of, can they now get past that is the real question. And we'll see how that goes. They had some great wins, winning over Eternal Fire, winning over G2. These are not easy things to do.
No.
So just getting those wins alone shows that there's potential. Kind of disappointed from the G2 angle. Really hope that they showed a little bit more. I mean, you know, the losses that they had was what, VP, who made the playoffs, and FaZe, who, you know, are always going to be a close game no matter who's on that roster at that point. But it's very clear that m0NESY has had less impact as a player. Uh, Missing Nico's mid rounding is like a huge issue, because Snacks can't do that on his own. I've noticed that like he just really struggles as a caller, and it's always been an issue, but now it's even more of an issue because now you don't have an extra voice on the team. So somebody's got to step up and be that
Hunter,
guy.
right?
And
Hunter's calling CT sides or something like
yeah,
that. I'm pretty
which
sure. So
I think actually Hunter played pretty well in the last few tournaments, which I'm always pretty critical of him. But from the eye test, it looked like he was still pretty comfortable, and he was willing to give over a lot of roles to Malbs and Heavy God. So that was good to see. But I think it's the Snacks calling that's the issue, and I think it's also, you're not gonna get the Nico peaks consistently out of a guy like Malbs unless you give him at least a year or two, if that, if anything. Like, because I don't even know if he's capable of doing that. And I know people love the guy. I mean, I love him. Coming from a North American person who's played in all those North American teams, but he's not Nico, and I don't think he ever will be. Which is like, it's a harsh thing to say, and it's unfortunate, but that's just the nature of the beast, right? It's like Nico is Nico, and you can have a guy try to fill those roles, and he'll probably do it well. I mean, you could probably get a great year out of him. You could probably get a good year and a half out of him, but you got to give him time. And even after you give him time, it's still going to be really, really big shoes to fill. And unless you get a superstar like m0NESY to be consistently at that level, this team is always just going to be like, they're just going to make playoffs, and that's just what it's going to be. And for a team like G2, you need them to kind of contend for trophies, not just be there in playoffs. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Another
Yeah,
interesting thing that came from it, just to touch on, is that with Zyu's MVP, he's now got the same amount of MVPs as Simple. Isn't
yeah.
21? I
And
know
and
Simple
then
did have a
Simple
little, he had a little pop
came
with
out with a
me.
little dig and was like, "Oh, he had 3 or 4 online MVPs from the COVID era." Shut up, man. Come on, come back and prove it that you're still on his level, which
Yeah.
I don't think you are. Like, come and prove it. Come back.
Yeah.
But there we
Honestly,
are.
after last year, I don't even know when. Like, I think the big thing is when is that contract up? When is that not? When is he a free man? Do we actually have
I
a date
know.
on it? Like, do we know?
I've no idea.
So
Yeah.
until
Anyway,
then, we can't.
I just want to quickly touch on like overperformers, underperformers. I'll just be very brief with this one.
No, go
I
for
think
it.
underperformer ever so slightly Furia. I think
Okay.
losing to Navi absolutely fine, but they got trounced by Navi, right? 13-5, 13-3. You kind of
Yeah.
expect that. It's Navi for goodness sake, but at the same time, they made it through the play-in okay. Had an easy portion of the bracket, but that felt like a guarantee for them. And then they fell to Astralis in the lower bracket, and Astralis are just not all that right now. And that was one of the games where I think the classic tweet came out: "Can we eliminate both teams?" Like both of them
Yeah.
looked really
Yeah.
bad. So yeah, and I'll say overperformer, definitely without a shadow of a doubt, Gamer Legion.
I was about to say, yeah.
I'm not gonna say that they could have probably done. They actually could have even done better. I feel like, but as Ash kind of detailed, I think PR was sick. They couldn't prac as much. They had like maybe 2 days prac total, if that. And that sort of delayed preparation. So the fact they were able to do that with not the best of preparation shows what level they're at. I mean, their game against Astralis, that was a 13-7, 13-7. Like PR. Sure, I saw a stat that maybe he eco-fragged more than anyone else in the tournament. Don't care. Someone's got to get them. He played incredibly overall, in my opinion. And Rez is looking rejuvenated. And it's the your time on NIP does not count meme has definitely been overplayed and overblown.
Yeah.
It's said by everyone. Say the line Bart, all the memes you want to use for it. But it's happened again. Like he's looking so solid, and he was always Mr. Consistent on NIP for such a long time. Like he was always average, never below average, I feel like, and quite often above average in the modern day. Now he's above average again, and he seems like Ash is getting some, or excuse me, Ash and ZTR are getting some great work out of him.
Yeah, and I think it's also probably testament as well to just, you look at, again, you hate to harp on it because we did it a lot into us last year, but just that roster move by Metasport getting rid of ZTR, just how much it keeps coming back to bite them, just because, damn, dude, that decision obviously has not paid off well. I credit, I think now when we see Gamer Legion make runs like this, and of course they lost the Spirit, it's fair enough, it's going to happen, right? It's Spirit.
Yeah.
Took a map off him as well,
exactly,
so that's
right?
no easy feat.
We're talking about a team of a very young team, and I think we're getting to the point now, especially with how many times Game Legion have had to rebuild and how many times they've still been able to go deep and have these amazing runs, that for me, like, Ash has got to be considered like minimum a top 5 coach in the world. I can't see, like, it actually makes you wonder what he would be like if he actually had an unlimited budget as well, because we've seen kind of on the flip side what Zonic's like with an unlimited budget, and now it doesn't do anything. And you've got Ash, who's using basically tier 2 players who have been very good at the tier 2 and deserve a shot at tier 1. He's given them a shot, and then they're taking down and scalping some big teams along the way. I mean, for me, it's super impressive. Like, that win they got over Astralis, I think is proof in the pudding of just, like, budget means nothing, right? It's about kind of that team. Even before that, the win over Mouse as well. That's a kind of a funny talking point in its own regard about Mouse.
Of course.
We could maybe call them a massive underperformance in a way, right? But
for a good reason.
Yeah, exactly. What happens when you get rid of your IGL, you bloody donuts. That's kind of on them. But yeah, Game Legion, I'm super impressive. I really hope that Game Legion will just become a stalwart at this sort of, at least getting towards the playoffs of big events. Like, just any sort of deep run in STA tournaments like this is super sick to see, and it just continues to prove like how good Ash is at finding new puzzle pieces and slotting them in and making it work. And I think the signings he's made have been fantastic, right? PR, we all knew he was going to be talented. We've seen him on Mars NXT, so damn good. But Rez, like, that was such a surprising move, I think, for everybody, just because he's always just been seen as Nip's guy. I think he's been there for like seven years, like 9 months or something ridiculous like that, like a long time. And if we're being completely honest, in NIP wasn't exactly like flourishing at the end. He was just like, dwindling there and just sort of coasting along. And that is sort of NIP in a nutshell. but then comes into his own and is right back to being such a solid, impactful player. I mean, Ash continues to prove to me, you know, and I'm obviously saying this with a lot of UKCS bias, but I'm happy to kind of like die on that hill, I think, for me. So, yeah, I agree. I think Game Legion's a good one to shout out there. And, you know, I hold my hands up. I didn't believe in Torsen for a while. I really didn't think he was the right
It's a really good point.
the right person
Yeah.
for this team. And you know, I'd seen him prior to Game Legion, and when they picked him up, I was like, this has got to be a panicked move. Like, why are they picking up Torsen of all people? And Ash continues to prove me why they picked him up. Right, you know, just super solid. And losing Flammus as well, like it's a hard puzzle piece to lose. I mean, he was unbelievably good for that small stint he was on Gamer Legion. He was so good for them, and like firepower, impact wise, T side rating, like that guy was a different beast. But then again, when the rumored figures like $1 million USD that VP paid for him, Game Legion's not gonna say no to that. They can't basically say no to it. And it might even make them a profitable org in a way, right? You know, we don't have many of them, especially with Endpoint now being kind of gone, which we'll come back to a little bit later. But it's just like it could be like Game Legion and Ents, like the only two we've got. Ents doing good work themselves, we're not at that level just yet. So I think you're right. I'm loving seeing Game Legion do well.
And with Flammus as well, right? That's one of the things that Ash realized so well, right? Like, he realized that, I think he used an example. It would be like, you know, Slend and another rifler on one side of the map being passive, and then they'd lose two members elsewhere, and Flammus would feel forced to push in to recover the round.
Yeah.
And he was like, listen, Flammus is amazing, but the balance is off here, and we need to find an answer to that with a different type of player. Rez is that type of player. He brings balance, I feel like. And also, again, to touch on Towson, I was of the same opinion. I thought he was not good enough to play tier 1, tier 1.5, and he's reached a level now where he doesn't need to be the main point man anyway.
Yeah.
But if he needs to be, if he's in a situation where he might need to deliver, he can actually put up a decent, you know, 13, 11 KD game. Just as an example, right? Like he can be in that area. And he had a couple of games where he was, top fragging and looking really solid. So he's proved me wrong for sure. He's fit in really nicely, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how they go in the future because, of course, they're going to have a lot of opportunities, despite VRS weirdness, to play a lot of events this year. So there's a lot of progression to come.
Currently 12th as well, ranking wise. So, you know, they're, even if some other tournaments do go a little bit south, they're actually in a really decent spot. So yeah, looking forward to that. If we're done there, should we move on to Cluj?
Sure.
We're good with that? Right, so we'll move on to PGL Cluj Napoca, which is starting in 2 days' time, right in saying? I think that's right, 2 days'
Friday,
time.
yep.
Yeah, on Valentine's Day, on the February the 14th. There we go.
How romantic. Who wants to watch it with me on VC? No one.
Trav's looking for an e-data for his PGL Cluj watch party. But yeah, Twitch chat. We've got back-to-back kind of big events coming through. Now, obviously, the big sort of talking point is that a few teams have turned this down. They're not turned up. I think obviously the Nota ones, Spirit not here, Navi not here as well. On the flip side,
G2.
Yeah, G2. But then on the flip side, teams like Liquid, who it feels risky, and I think Paladin, I'll start with you here. Liquid declining the invite. Obviously, it wasn't the team's decision; it was the org's decision. But we've spoke about this briefly in our group chat. But do you want to run it down for the people of why this is potentially problematic and actually where this could be an issue later down the line for them?
So they won't miss out on the major. That's like I hope people understand that they'll still be at the major. So it's not the end of the world, right? And so I think from the org's perspective, they're thinking about we're still gonna be at the major. We're still guaranteeing our sticker money, which is great. But if you think about it, the Americas region right now is very competitive. I think there's a lot of South American teams that are really having a bit of a resurgence right now, or not even resurgence, but they're just getting better right now. They're just improving a lot. And you got Pain, you got MIBR, a lot of these teams that could potentially overcome Liquid's ranking. And if that happens, they would potentially slide out of contention and they would have to go down through a couple of more stages in the major, because now we've got 3 stages. And they would potentially have to play from stage 3 or maybe even stage 2, depending on how far they fall. And that comes down to events like this, because there are not too many events between now and Austin. So obviously they won't have to play the MRQ or anything crazy like that, but you just got to think about the stress that it's going to put the teams under when you've got to basically play for a month straight. Having to
Yeah.
play from stage 3 and gun for playoffs is going to be just such an arduous task. So I think in their minds, they're probably thinking like, we already botched Kato. We didn't go as deep as we should have.
Yeah.
So not many points there, and you're not going to get any points from Cluj while there's quite a wealth of America's teams here. You've got Pain, MIBR, and Wildcard, and Complexity, mind you. So all four of these teams can earn VRS points and probably won't lose that many VRS points because
Mm.
they're playing against good teams. So in their minds, it's just like they're getting extra chances to jump Liquid. So overall, real worry for them. Obviously, the worst part is they can't do anything about it but just sit and watch it
Yeah.
happen.
They've got to pray on their
And
downfall. They've literally got to hate watch
yeah,
American teams.
yeah, which is just insane that
Yeah.
that has to be a thing. But they'll have Pro League, and I think Pro League will be like that last game, if I'm not mistaken.
I think
We'll have to
so.
keep an eye on that. But yeah, it's a real sticky situation for them, and they just gotta watch.
Annie, I want to tee you up for this here because there's definitely something that
Mm-hmm.
I read that I think you probably would know about as well.
Mm-hmm.
The actual reason for Liquid not playing, like the top orgs as well, right, is due to, is it the revenue share or like not being a part of
Mm.
PGL's like system, like something along
Yeah,
those
so the
lines?
other
No.
yeah, so the other weird thing that PGL are doing is they're dumping all the money into the prize pool, right? And from a
Yeah.
player's perspective, it's awesome because all of that money is going straight to the VRS points and all that good stuff. I think the wording is still a little shaky as to whether or not the club revenue share counts towards VRS points. I'm not exactly sure on the semantics of that, but
Sure.
that could actually be really important moving forward. But for the orgs, it's a little weird, right? Because since they don't have guaranteed revenue share, they kind of just have to like go by like, okay, how do we divvy up the prize pool? Can we even take money out of the prize pool from the winnings for our company, or do we just have to give it all to the players?
Mm.
That's kind of up for debate, and obviously
Mm.
that's an org by org basis type thing. So I really wonder whether Liquid were like kind of playing the, I'm not gonna say greedy game, but more like the corporate game where it's like we would like the guaranteed rev share from a Blast or an ESL, and be able to use that towards our company, than a situation where, let's say, Liquid does well, they make playoffs, which they probably should, and make a buttload of money, but all of that money just goes to the VRS
Yeah.
points and not really to any of the company itself. So it's a waste on their part to pay for all of it.
Yeah. I think there's a weird precedent. I was discussing this with Anders a little bit of where in the future, and it won't really be in the first half of the year, and it might not even happen, right? But there is a world in which a team can turn down an invite for whatever reason they do, right? And by turning it down, other results go unfavorably and they could lose out on future invites because they're trying to play this long meta game. And all it takes is one or two people from your region, especially if you are Liquid, for example. Let's say like all these North American sides do go, super far and get really good ranking points and this, that, and the other. And there's a world in which in the future teams could turn down events for whatever reason they decide to do so, but it actually has a really big knock-on effect, and they can miss out on future invites because they tried to play some long meta game and it works against them. And I do wonder whether that's the case. But then on the flip side as well, it's something that Spirit have really kind of spoken about quite a lot about not trying to burn out their players, and obviously it worked out for them last year. I remember kind of Spirit and kind of people affiliated with them talking about it when they won the major, saying, isn't it a good thing that we turned down IM Rio and this, that, and the other because we had more time to rest up and be ready for this kind of big month in sort of China. So I do wonder whether that ever happens, right? Whether a team kind of turns an event down for whatever reason they decide, and it ends up being quite costly later down the line because other results just don't go favorably for them, and that could be a really spicy thing of then you kind of have to work your way back up again. And for teams like Liquid, it can be a bit of a long road, or not even just Liquid. Teams that are maybe like a little bit lesser down the pecking order could end up being in a bit of a weird spot or not getting direct invites to kind of later on in the tournament, having to go for like a Kato play-in, for example, rather than going directly to the tournament. So it's interesting. I do wonder whether that's the case, especially with teams starting to turn them down. Furia also very last minute turned down, but that was it a visa issue they were saying?
Yeah, they dropped out of the tournament, so
Yeah.
they were actually there, and I think Imperial Valkyries have taken
Yes.
the invite spot
Correct.
because
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I think Fury was saying something to. I swear I read it was like a visa issue. So
Yeah, it might have been. It might have been a visa
I
thing. Yeah,
can
and I
sort
think
of
they wanted to stay back in to confirm the visas for the U.S. is what
make
if
sense.
I might have been.
Something
They
along
want
those
to
lines. Yeah.
prioritize Austin,
Yeah.
which completely understandable. I can't tell you how many visa issues we've had for people coming over here, and I would rather have everybody here and all the teams have all their players for those that qualify. So I'm glad that a lot of orgs are prioritizing that because I think that honestly, a lot of these visa issues sometimes feel like just mishaps on the org's part because they weren't
Yeah.
planning ahead and getting these visas ahead of time. I would rather you guys try to secure them as early as possible. And then if you don't make it, you don't make it and the visas don't work out. But
Yeah.
I would like for that to at least be available for them. So I think they made the right decision. They're not going to lose anything crazy, I don't think, because Furia is still pretty far ahead of most of the pack
Yeah.
in the Americas, anyways.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. I think the interesting thing with Imperial Valkyries now coming in is obviously we've seen some good series out from them, but ultimately no wins yet, right? And I think the thing is that they're actually now sort of running out of chances to keep that ranking. Obviously, they turned down a few events and forfeited a few games to keep ranking. Which, first of all, I saw this is kind of a conversation that we'll come back to a little bit because we're going to touch on the VRS ranking in a few points time. But I think for Imperial Valkyries, they are in a spot where they have to be a little cautious, right? Because they are slowly going down. You know, I think since they first got invited to like Blast Bounty, they were like 23rd, I think it was, in VRS ranking. Now they've had themselves 28th. And as they pick up losses, obviously they're going to slowly kind of creep out of that contention. And, you know, being, what is it, top 32, if I'm right in saying, I think is the amount for like the major. I feel like it was some, I swear I saw a number.
Maybe
But then
something like
obviously it's
that. Yeah,
split.
32 sounds right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's split regionally and whatever, but they're also, you know, they're playing out of the hardest region, right? So and the most competitive. So this is not, it's not the last chance for Imperial Valkyries, but I really feel like this is the time where we need to see, you know, at least a win, just to kind of cement themselves in these tier one tournaments, and also kind of, you know, keep that ranking somewhat favorable for them so they can get invites going, you know, later down the line, and hopefully kind of get that spot, which obviously they're gunning for, which is for the major in Austin. And the cutoff, there's still enough time where if results don't go their way, they could just slip out of it, right? And there's already teams just below who are actually starting to kind of climb their way up in the VRS rankings, playing some of these ranked tournaments online, and they're getting that prize money that is pushing them up, right? I mean, you know, any team that's sort of in and around like the 30th rank, like especially like 30 to 35 or whatever, all of these online ranked tournaments are so important to them about pushing in towards that you know, major kind of qualifier situation. And I do worry a little bit that Imperial Valkyries, that if they go in towards this one, pick up a kind of a double loss once again, or it's a Swiss system, so it's a little bit different, but if they pick up all losses again, they could actually start creeping out, and their ranking could take a bit of a hit, and then it could be too little too late. Because if I'm right in saying, is there no Impact Land before the major? I think that's right.
Uh,
I think the next Impact
Can't
Land's
remember.
I think it's just after the major, so that's obviously where they're expecting to get the real injection of firepower, money really in terms of kind of the rankings and
so
stuff.
yeah,
So
it'd be May 23rd, but that is beyond the cutoff. Like that is like
yes, yeah, it is.
the
Yeah.
same time as Dallas, but Dallas is not going to count
Mm-hmm.
for Austin.
Okay.
So yeah, they would miss it actually.
That's the thing
Yeah.
as well. Like, I totally understand what Imperial Valkyries are doing with, like, you know, gaming the system. Like, people will criticize them for it. Oh, listen, they're saying they want practice,
Yeah.
but they're declining all these online invites to playing against people like Paravision all the time. Like, any male team would do that in
Yes.
their
Yeah,
situation. Like, you can't blame them for it. It's the house
you
of
got to
the
blame the system at the end of
you
the
blame the
day,
system,
right?
not the players. And
Yeah.
but there is a system right now in place. I think it was mentioned the other day. I think Striker tweeted about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, forfeits will start counting as losses. So teams are going to have to be
Which is
careful as
how it
soon as
should
that comes
be.
into play. That's how it should be, exactly. Forfeiting a tournament like what day before, you just that should count as a loss for sure. So yeah, that's just a reminder that that'll probably be changing. But yeah, I mean, either way, like Cluj as a whole as a tournament with all this going on, I think actually it's a cool event for me
Yeah.
because like we don't get the top teams because of the whatever decisions they've made, so we're guaranteed like what could be a really interesting playoffs of like a team that maybe has never won a big land trophy, having an opportunity. Like just looking at the team list right now, we know Mongols have already won Compass, I think it was, right?
Mm.
But they could be considered the favourites alongside FaZe, and you've got Eternal Fire as well. Eternal Fire won like one CCT Malta LAN in their entire
Yeah, yeah.
existence as an organisation, so that's a great opportunity for them. We don't know how Mouse with Spinks is gonna look. Can VP kick on? Even a team like 3D Max, for example, and maybe Pain as
They're
well. And they had a
improving.
disappointing
Yeah.
Kato.
Yeah.
Like 3D Max and Pain in that sort of middle portion of the entire tournament when it comes to ranking, they could be playoff teams and really could make a name for themselves and really get that money, prize, which we know how big the prize pool is,
Yeah.
and really help their
400K for the
VRS.
winner, man. That's
Yeah.
that's
It's
nearly a
crazy.
major win.
And
That's
actually,
insane.
just very briefly before we get onto other teams, we want to say as well, I think 3D Max could be one of my underdogs for this tournament because Jocko, everyone questioned that move to get rid of him, but he's a much more volatile player in terms of his individual level than Body is. And Body has tons more experience. And even though people might say, oh, you know, Body's a bit outdated now, I think Body is actually looked really, really solid in the early days in the online games they played. So
Mhm.
I think 3D Max are one of those teams we could see in plus for this event. There's a great opportunity for so many people here.
But also the
I,
other way as well,
I
we could see like actually, if we get like one good like deep run out of like a wild card, like what it'll do for like a team like that would be huge. If they get like a top 8, that'd be
Yeah.
wild. Even below that, it's unlikely if Saw pick up like any wins. No, but if Saw were to make a deep run, again, they found themselves Valve ranking wise 41st in the world, so that is like outside of the cutoff, right? So one good tournament here where they make a deep run, and that could be enough. So this is actually, I think a few people touched on this on Twitter a little bit, but this is kind of what it was like in the pre-COVID days when there was so many tournaments going on that teams couldn't say yes to every single one, or they didn't want to say yes to every single one. So you would get kind of a change up in who was winning all of these kind of big S tier tournaments, and it was actually you go into every new week with a new tournament, and there is a real potential of a new winner. And of course, we're guaranteed back-to-back S tier tournaments with a completely different winner, which I think in itself is what I like to see. Right, I think that spices up the top level of the circuit quite a lot. So
Mhm.
as much as people I think were complaining about no spirit, no vitality, G2, Liquid Fury, yada yada, I like that we're going to get variations, because like all it takes is one big tournament push from somebody who's unexpected, and who knows what it can do for the ranking.
And then that also builds a narrative for the major. Like, I mean, that makes it so exciting where you got, okay, phase one Cluj, Vitality won Kato, and
Mm.
somebody won Bucharest, and you can go so on and so forth. And that makes the playoffs so much more exciting. It's like now that all these teams have won, now when the chips are down, how do you play once the pressure has been
Yeah.
kind of notched up to like 12? So it's great in theory. Like you see all the kind of top level ideas of the VRS system, and it's great. It's really cool, and I think it really works. And you've seen the results of it almost immediately with viewership and how people are talking about top level CS and how involved the community is.
Mm.
But when you get down to the nitty gritty, when you talk about sustainability and trying to get all these smaller teams involved as well, which is how we're going to build this game in the first place. That's where I think we have a lot of problems, and I think we'll eventually get into that. But yeah, that's like the real trouble for me is as somebody who watches tier 2 avidly. We work these events as often as we can. Not I mean just by the nature of how little we're working in comparison to last year, I
Yeah.
think that alone kind of suggests like the worry that we have. And I mean I don't think it's even necessarily a talent thing. It's more just like a the teams also just don't have much
Mm.
to play for, which is a real worrying sign moving forward. So yeah, I guess yeah, we can keep talking about it if you guys want, but that's the kind of worry that I have.
It is an interesting conversation, I guess. To contextualize, for just touching on the talent side of things. So for people at home who don't really know, so the weird situation that we're like with 2025 is that it doesn't look like there's as many sort of tier 2, like lands is obviously what most of us who are kind of on the come up. Obviously the dream is always to be tier 1, right, and to work these big events, your
Yeah.
Katos and your Clujes, and work in the ESL and the PGR, the Blast circuit, etc. But there's less sort of lands now, it feels, in the tier 2 to really kind of prove yourself at that level. We've already got kind of like no more ESL Challenger League lands, which obviously were kind of a big thing for us. It seems like Elisa aren't doing a LAN as well anymore. They kind of stopped their circuit, so you haven't got that one anymore. And it's a bit of a weird spot where it is feeling like a bit of a waiting game. And I think teams have the same thing as well, where it's the way the circuit is right now, it's very, very top heavy in every way. And I think this is sort of an interesting thing where I do wonder whether that is just because it's like a 2025 teething issues with a new VRS ranking and maybe things change later down the line. But I don't know what your guys' thoughts on it, but it's something that I've thought about a lot of, like, is this just like the circuit we're like going to get used to now, where I guess for us it's sort of like, you know, I feel like last year, for example, I think I did like I want to say like 10 CS lands, something along those lines. And you know, for me, I don't even know what my next LAN is going to be, and it could not even be in like the first half of the year, right? So it's like it is like a weird thought process. I mean, thankfully there is online work to kind of keep us going, but there's also less online work, like you touched on. So because a lot of teams, tournaments don't have qualifiers as much now. We have a few at the moment with like Blast for Lisbon and I Am Dallas squads that have been running sort of in the last week or so, but for the most part it seems like there's less online work, there's less LAN work, and I think that's a big thing for teams as well, where like if you're like a tier 2 team trying to climb up in towards tier 1, it feels very difficult. Obviously the open quals for the major are always a big thing, where you see these sort of, you know, ITBs of the world, or the Gamer Legions in all fairness of the world, who would kind of come through those systems. But even for talent it's a similar thing as well, like, you know, no RMRs anymore. That was always a good opportunity sort of for like tier 2 to prove that you can kind of cover these tier 1 games. And yeah, I don't know what you guys feel about, but it's something that I've thought about quite a lot.
We still don't really know what the MRQ plans are as well, right?
True.
Like, I mean, we know that EU
we'll
is very,
see what
very
happens.
likely going to be online regionally for NA, SA, the other Asia ones. We don't really know yet either. I do, you know, as you guys know, I try to think positively, even though it's maybe copium.
Yeah.
But like, I think we did get into the scene at probably the best time possible, because we might be, I'm not going to say that like this is the case, like, you know, back in the day, maybe if some people asked me for advice, I would say maybe a year ago, like, yeah, absolutely, you should start commentating, you know, do ESC Advanced, do ESL Challenge League, whatever. Now I feel like it's almost impossible to get you to start, even like if you started you started at the time we did, maybe you've got a good chance of making it. I'm not just saying this because I don't want competition, like, I'm not being ridiculous here, right? But genuinely right now it's so ridiculously difficult. You've got the upper echelons of talent that will work a lot of these tier 1 lands that everyone knows are just incredible. There's a reason why people say Counter-Strike has the best talent, you know, across the board, tier 1 and maybe even tier 2.
They're overflowing with it, man.
But they're overflowing
we
with
don't
it.
have enough spots.
There's not enough spots, and
Yeah.
like when the only opportunities we might get will be like toward the end of the year, maybe when if like Compass run a LAN, or if you know, whatever Thunderpick do, like, and even then that's really hard to get because maybe they hire a lesser duo that is like in that tier 1.5 gauge sort of level, right? It's so hard to know what you're going to get, and as Neo says, losing the ESL Challenger lands is a big shame. I had like one per year since 2022. And yeah, they're always super enjoyable, even if it's a slightly lower tier tournament.
Sure.
Just being in person and doing an event is just such a nice feeling. And yeah, I get, again, like, feel lucky that we got in when we did, integrated ourselves into the online scene, got the couple of lands we did. It's given us a place in the hierarchy in tier 2 right now, which I feel like is a solid place to be. But I don't know, like, reality dictates some of the goats are going to have to retire before we get an opportunity. Like,
yeah, it's
as
like
simple as that.
It is a waiting game. This is sort of I was like speaking to the missus about it, and she was saying, and like, you know, what is like the path, and I was like, fucking, I don't know. But it is I think it is a waiting game. But at the same time, though, I also feel like the other side. I always look at like people who I see as sort of like my inspirations when I kind of was starting commentating. And obviously, you know, primarily would be the British guys, right? I'm talking like your Dinkos, your Harry, your Hugos, right? The guys who actually did grow through tier 2 into kind of tier 1. And I think
they give us hope.
Yeah,
for sure.
they do give us hope, first of all.
Yeah.
But I will happily hold my hands up. Those guys are, you know, obviously way more experienced now, but they're just incredibly talented. And I don't think it's a level
So
that
good.
I'm at yet, right? So I'll happily hold my hands up. It's a level that
There's a reason why we haven't made it yet.
Exactly.
The other guys are just so damn good.
They're so damn good, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing that gives me a little bit of hope is that, you know, I was looking at some of the careers of these guys, and, you know, like a lot of them were doing like online, majority online work with some tier 2 lands, sort of what we do, for like 6-7 years before they got their real shot, or like maybe like, you know, 5-6 years before they get a real shot. And like for me, like entering into my 5th year or whatever, maybe that is actually just like the general path of the course, right? Where it's like, you do have to like do, this online work. I think especially when, we started, and all of us in sort of different ways, but we kind of like got lands actually quite early comparatively, I think is probably the way. Obviously, because it was
Yeah,
COVID to start
grateful
off,
for that.
no one's going to be, doing lands in COVID because obviously you couldn't. And then the second it opened up, we all in some way had some sort of lands, right? And I think the big thing is, for them, they went through probably a bit of a weird Wild West time of the online Counter-Strike. I mean, we've all heard the horror stories from back in the day. So I think it is a waiting game. That's basically my thing. I think I always knew at one point that like, because my career like year on year had scaled up and it kept getting like better year on year, that it had to be a point where it stops. I already assumed that 2025 was going to be that year where it like at least slows down or it like mellows out a little bit. But that's probably what it is, right? He mellows out and it's a waiting game. But then the issue when you talk about the waiting game is like some of these guys as well aren't very old, right? So, how long do you wait? I think is the big thing. But I think, again,
I'm in it for the long haul, mate. I don't care.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
I'm gonna ply my trade the best I can. But yeah, as you say, like it's for me, you want to feel like you mentioned it to me as well. Like you want to feel like you make progress. You don't like being in a place where you don't feel like you're making progress or you feel like you're
I don't like
stagnating.
stagnating.
Yeah, for me, I'm like I really would want to just get at least the one LAN a year, because I've had the challenges go on year since 2022. Valencia, then Yongshiping a couple of years in a row. So that was fantastic. But it's also like I think that getting the one LAN a year makes you feel like you've worked towards something in a calendar year as well. Because the online work is always like excellent to have. We're all very grateful for it. It keeps you going. But it does feel like the side work, the preparation, refining your craft when you get an opportunity in front of a crowd or at a big studio, like, and you want to get the opportunity again. Like, it's such a great thing to be able to do. So hopefully soon. But yeah, we've kind of deviated from the subject because we've all gone down that rabbit hole. But it's a fun conversation because it's our passion as our job, and whether it's analyst, host, whatever, commentator, I think we all love what we do. We love the scene for a reason. That's why we're here. And yeah, I can't wait to see how it transpires. I do agree with you that 2025 feels like a year where we just have to wait and see, and then other tournament organizers and as Valve actually do start tweaking the VRS, I'm sure they are doing. Even there's no way they're not looking at it. Like they have I think 2 people who look at it pretty often. That will keep changing. And then next year, 2026, when, as we know these days, teams have to invite, or teams have to, announce their event almost like a year and a bit beforehand, right? If it's tier 1, which is crazy. We're getting announcements for PGL events in 2027, for God's sake, right?
Yeah.
So like that shows you where the scene's progressing, and that can only be a good thing to iron out a calendar in the future years, and then maybe more lands will come. The scene will be even more packed, and those sort of tournaments, more things will clash even. And then there's the people TOs and people who hire talent will have to look a bit deeper, and maybe they'll look at Wikipedia pages, see our names, and say, "Oh yeah, these guys have done big qualifiers. Let's give them a chance." So who knows?
Yeah, I thought maybe actually while we're discussing this, it's not a bad time to kind of just bring up the calendar for like basically a year, right? And just look at sort of the conversation that we're having about where it's a little harder at least this year compared to like last year, for example. Last year there was quite a bit going on, but like you look at February, Cluj, obviously talent's out for there. Sky Sports Souvenir. Is that the one that got cancelled? I don't know if that's just
it's only one in November now, apparently.
Yes, yeah. So that one got cancelled. So forget that. EPL, they have their roster. That's like always. It's like the kind of the ESL, the IM guys sort of locked in there. Open Lisbon, who knows there? Blast have actually been they've sort of generally tried a few changes, but most of the time those changes actually come on the desk rather than the casting. It's normally the same kind of duos who do that. PGL Bucharest, you probably assume it's a similar lineup to Cluj. You never know, in all fairness. But PGL at least yet haven't like sort of tested the water a little bit deeper. Yala, don't know about Yala to be fair, but then again, it's only one duo in person. At least from last year, it was one duo in person, which was Henry and Jackie. And who knows, it could just be the same there as well. Melbourne, same thing. You probably expect the same IEM. Pneumatic Masters, in all fairness, I went that one last year. That one could be a shot, but who knows? I've not heard anything, so we'll see. Blast
For Melbourne, they'll
Rivals.
probably hire some of the Aussies, by the way, as
Yeah,
well, which is
yeah,
which is cool, right? At least the Aussies get something per year, you know.
yeah,
Like I feel bad for them being in probably the worst region to get hired very often,
yeah.
right? So they are quite talented, those lads, and they'll hopefully get a land.
Big up my goat, Jordan Elfish guy.
Yeah, there you go.
If he's not there, I'm rioting.
Yeah,
And then, so if I'm right in saying Rivals is like more premier than Open Lisbon
Yes.
is the way. So that's the one in Monterey, which first of all, sick place for an event. I gotta say, like, that'd be cool. And then PGL, Dallas, Impact, probably not. Major, unlikely. Fissure doing an event. I haven't really heard too much about that in terms of like what the event actually is. It says Fissure July. I think that's all it says right now.
I don't think they've announced like a format or teams or anything.
No.
So yeah,
It's just
that's a very weird scenario.
in Belgrade. That's all we really know about it.
Yeah.
And then Cologne, similar thing. Bounty, you probably just assume similar lineup to what was in kind of Bounty in January. Esports World Cup, same thing. So you kind of go through it. I think it was unfortunate that Star Ladder got cancelled. The one that was meant to be in May, I think it was.
Budapest, yeah.
Yeah,
the later one in the year is going to be the one that will be.
Yeah,
will run,
Star Ladder might try something a little different. CAC, no ideas there. Northern Nomadic Masters, Thunderpick. We were involved in Thunderpick.
We have hopes there for sure.
Yeah, but probably not the land stage. The online stage, we should be there, you'd hope. But the land stage, probably unlikely. And then, you can see sort of just in the year, because there's less of these sort of like tier 2 lands. There's basically, if you're looking at what a class is actually tier 2 lands, it's probably Nomadic Masters in April and October. And then, looking through it now, I mean, like, Fissure's like $1 million prize pool, so that's not even a tier 2 land as well. So that's basically the only one that is actually out there right now. So there's 2 tier 2 lands kind of currently of the same company, and that is kind of
previous years we'd have like 3 ESL Challenger lands as part of the ecosystem that qualified teams to Pro League. Now it's
4,
only
actually, right, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, 4 actually, a couple of times. Yes, one year had 3, a couple of years had 4. And like that, they would qualify teams to Pro League, and obviously the team that came second, if the winner of the tournament was already in Pro League, the second place team would make Pro League. So there's a good opportunity there, but now it's mostly done through obviously VRS and ESL Challenger League, right? ESL Challenger League is now technically a part of the qualifier. We'll see. I think see that in July. We've got some qualifiers to work for that event, I believe, for Pro League. This is kind of the transition season of Pro League. Between what teams qualified from last year in the old system to the new system. So yeah, it's really interesting, but you just have to keep plugging away. And I guess I kind of want to finish this little segment because we steered away from it a little bit. I just want to get your guys' thoughts on, just because we left it in the dust a little bit with that conversation, just at the end of the Cluj conversation, I want like an underdog and a team that you want to really do well. I'm not going to start because I've started the conversation. So Neo, you can give us your thoughts on who you think is going to win. Maybe a team that could do really well.
An underdog team, this is.
Yeah, go for an underdog.
Oh, good question. I've got the rankings up here. So let me have a look if there's any that I want to do well. I mean, I would actually like to see Pain cement themselves as like a top team. I always love Pain. I just think they're like a cool side.
Kato was rough for them.
Yeah, it was. So that doesn't help. I'm trying to think like of teams that have a chance at being at lands that are like considered an underdog. Do you know what? Actually, one that I have enjoyed watching is Heroic. Some Pius actually looks really solid. Obviously, as expected, right? And it kind of, in a similar vein that we joke about NIP, your time on
Heroic
Falcons.
aren't going to be at Cluj.
I know. Oh, we talk about Cluj or we talk about the year? I thought... Oh,
Cluj, sorry,
okay,
yeah.
for Cluj. Oh. Underdog team that won't do well.
I wasn't clear.
Yeah, Pain's a good one for me. I think maybe another one that I've actually enjoyed watching them is been Big. I think Hyped looks really good. I really doubted Hyped coming back in towards this team. Because his previous stint wasn't really anything notable. And he's very kind of immediately made his impact look, pretty stellar. I think like I was checking the other day. I'm just double checking. I was rating since coming in towards his team. Yeah, you go 1.12 since he's come back in towards his roster. In a month is not bad. So yeah, I'd like to see this team. Hype seems really, he's flashy. He's fun to watch. Me and Annie got to see him at kind of ISF at the World Esports Championships, and granted they didn't Ended up winning it, but like he was really good for Germany. He's actually the only one really for that ex alternate attacks lineup that was like super solid. Crimbo, I always just love watching Crimbo play. And QB, I like him as a person. And I just want to see maybe a little bit better in terms of the rating out from him. But it's a cool side. JDC is seems super sick in this side since he's come back in about a year ago. So I would say big or a side that I want to see do well. I think they at times when they play good Counter Strike, it's very enjoyable to watch.
Okay, yeah. I mean, obviously, I'd like the Americas teams to do well. Wildcard and Complexity. I think those are pretty safe. Um, I think Complexity got a lot of work to do. Like they definitely didn't impress me at all. I thought that Nick was really awesome to watch. The way that he approached B anchoring was really cool on Train. Had a really good game against Eternal Fire, and honestly surprised that they pushed them as hard as they did. Nearly was going to be a third map against them, and that alone to me bodes an exciting factor to them. I think Sixty has got a lot of work to do as just a player, and I see what he's trying to do. He's a very aggressive player, trying to be unorthodox, trying to kind of surprise these EU guys, but none of it's really worked, and so he kind of just looks like a bot on the server, to be completely honest with you, which is a bummer because I've seen what this guy's been able to do, and he's like an incredible player when he's actually on his A game. So I think just trying to figure out how to be an aggressive player when you watch, like, you got to watch the demos first and then kind of create that aggressive play around that. And I think hopefully JT and TC can kind of guide him in that sense, because I think he absolutely has a place within the top levels of Counter Strike, and it's just about him trying to figure out how to integrate his style, which is most important. And then Wildcard is also super fun. I think they've actually impressed me with the kind of stability that they've shown. They haven't really had a drop off in performance per se. They're beating who they're supposed to beat. They're contending against teams that they shouldn't. And overall, like, JBA is significantly improving on land now.
Yeah.
Susp has really still shown that he's a rock solid anchor. So I don't have any issues. Stan is still calling it's the EG days. So that's honestly really cool to see that he's shown that kind of improvement as well. So I hope that for both of these two teams that they can have enough runway to play and be at Austin at the same time as well, and not have to make significant roster changes. But that's my America spiel. As far
Yeah.
as a team that I expect to kind of win this tournament, I'm probably gonna just say Eternal Fire get it done finally.
Okay.
I think that they've had issues closing games out, and that's just the nature of playing in an arena, playing against stiffer competition. But I think what I saw in that series against what was it, Navi, I believe, the one that they won at Bounty, that series really showed me that they're made of sterner stuff. That they've got a lot to really be excited about them. Sorry, not Navi, G2 was
Okay.
the
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
the team I was thinking about. But yeah, that series just showed to me that, like, they've got a lot of grit in the team. They can get back from a lot of deficits. And more importantly, I think Woxic has improved so much that I can finally be like, okay, it doesn't have to be the Zantares show. There's multiple options for this team to win, and because of that, there's a lot of danger for a lot of teams. So I hope that they can get it done. I think it would be just a great story, even for the side of, like, oh, it's just one nation of a team
Mm.
that won. We haven't had that story, and I feel, in a long time
Yeah.
beyond, like, the Russians. So um,
Racism.
that would be really cool.
Londus
Racism
would be proud.
is
Londoners would be
really
proud.
exciting. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's very fair. If I was to pick a winner, I'd also kind of want Eternal Fire to win. Eternal Fire or Mongols would be a great win
Yeah.
because I think I'd prefer Eternal Fire purely because they haven't won anything yet for so long. So yeah, I do agree with you. Underdog is 3D Max. I touched on them a little bit earlier. I think they actually looked better already, and like they realized what needed to be changed to maybe accentuate their particular skills in that roster because they're always there or thereabouts. They need something a bit more consistency to really take them to that next level, and maybe I think Body can be that guy, a more experienced player at these particular tournaments. That kind of brings me on to Mals, right? The elephant in the room here.
Yeah.
Like, how do we think they're gonna do, guys?
Not well.
Like,
Dog shit, I fear. Dog shit.
yeah, not even playoffs.
No.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
You've not got an IGL. I think that
I,
team is
I
falling
think I
apart.
think that's the surprise take. I don't know if that's a surprise take even, but I think that Spinks is a locker room issue. The more that I see Vitality succeed, for one,
Yeah.
and then for two, I don't think Brolin is ready. I don't think he is. I don't think he's got the temperament for it. I don't think he's
Yeah.
got the leadership qualities that would make
Yeah.
me excited. And I think this is just the death of this roster, which is really sad.
Yeah, and I think as well, you look back on it in the sense of the decision behind what essentially felt like, we don't know the ins and outs, but what essentially felt like a Siuhy or Cyclone, me or him type vibe, and it does make you sort of question, why, like, where has this kind of come from? What has been? I'm sure it'll come out at some point once basically Siuhy moves on. Essentially, that's when maybe sort of details will start to kind of find their limelight. But yeah, I'm with you. I actually think currently where we're at, I don't see them making playoffs. I was not impressed by anything I've seen from Malice so far. I mean, for me, the issue, like you spoke of, is Broden ready to call? I don't think so. We saw the losses. They picked up a kind of Kato as well, and we're talking about the Liquid one, which was tough to see because they never really even got in towards that game. It's like 2-13-7 losses, and it was just like a whatever. And then Game Legion before that, and I think for Mouse, they should be beating a Game Legion every day of the week. If it was the full lineup, they would, right? But it's not, and I think this for me is where I'm feeling a little weird. And of course, I know that was playing with Zelex. But even still, I don't know if this is gonna change that much. I know it's probably a little bit more firepower than Zelex, but like you mentioned, that like kind of locker room issue there, the lack of voices now in this team, Brolin leading it. I don't have faith in Miles. Maybe they prove us wrong, but from what I've seen or what I see on the outset, I'm really kind of worried about this team.
For me, it's like you can't get rid of a perennial IGL and get away with it. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, like you
yeah,
can't do that. Ents didn't get away with it,
Yeah.
and Mouse will not get away with it.
Yeah. Sunny syndrome. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Exactly.
That's
This
the that's the
is
that's the police looking for Sherry.
There we go. But it's a good time
But
to talk about Siuhy in particular, right? And actually
yeah.
just kind of like dive into this. The topic that we want to talk about is sort of where does he go? And this is sort of something that, Joe, we spoke a little bit about it, I think, as the group we were with about at the kind of watch party. It was definitely something that got brought up. And, he's got to be one of the like hottest like prospects into not prospects, but like there's got to be a lot of teams looking at him. I think the first thing that came to my mind, I kind of made a little quip about it, is like when he got benched, I was like, GG Snacks has been a good run kind of thing. Like G2 feels like one where it's just like, that's just an upgrade. I don't care what anybody says. Like it is just an upgrade. I know G2 aren't doing too bad, right? And I can give him that, but still, like, I think most teams who are English speaking would consider Siuhy every day of the week, and especially those who are like outside of like maybe like the top 10 in particular. But even still, like, for example, like you could talk about teams who could just use that sort of voice in the team, especially when their leaderships looked a little weird. So I don't know, for me, I feel like a lot of teams surely have inquired about what that price is looking like.
Yeah, like
I think
it'd be
the
incompetence, Annie, wouldn't it? It'd be
right,
incompetence of
yeah,
an
exactly.
organization if they didn't look at it. I personally want G2. I know there's been some arguments for Liquid. So yeah, I'll let you continue before I
Yeah,
go
no,
on.
you're right. I mean, it's Liquid and G2. Those are the best options. And the
Yeah.
fact that both of these two teams are not vehemently trying to trade for this guy right now is kind of insane. At least I mean from what I've heard, right? There's no chatter about Shuhei. The fact that
Yes.
Shuhei is not in the headlines of like your rumors CS2 accounts on Twitter right
Yeah.
now is kind of insane to me. Like because I think that for Snacks, it's clear to me that there is no ceiling. There is no ceiling for this guy, and you're just gonna run out a lot of really good pieces prime. I mean, you're gonna run out of Modesty time. You're gonna run out of Heavy God mobs. This is a fantastic core to have, and honestly, I think Hunter has done enough for me personally to stay. I think it's purely like a calling thing at this point that I would love for Shuhei to be able to call these pieces. I think he would do a wonderful job for that. He's also very willing to sacrifice roles as he has along his time in Mouse. So I think that that's just a kind of a no brainer there. And same for Liquid. It's like yes, you can try to make this twist IGL thing work, and I think in the future, maybe 5 years from now, he's got. If we talk about Brolin not being able to be an IGL, I think Twist can. I think he's got the leadership qualities to do it. I think he's got the mechanics to do it as well. That later on in his career it could still work. But right now, you take out JKS from this team, and all of a sudden, it's like you've got one of the best anchors in the world. You've got one of the best lurkers in the world. You've got one of the best mechanical players in the world in Twists, and yeah, maybe you can play around with the opping situation. That's still a questionable bottleneck, but
Yeah.
at that point, you don't have to worry about one of the most important roles in the game, and that could just be huge for Liquid. And you talk about a team needing an extra little bit of spice to get over that hump of playoffs. That's exactly the talisman you need. So I think that it's kind of a no-brainer for both of these two teams, and
Yeah.
I think they've got to get them stat before Austin. I'd argue.
Well,
I'd say it's worth it.
that's the thing. I think generally from kind of the consensus that a lot of people are having is that it's just a unfortunately post Austin move. I think a lot of teams are just so scared about making changes. And I mean, it is rough, right? I think it's a little weird. I think in the sense, I mean the way
I
I
just
look at
can't
it,
conceive a world as where Siuhy doesn't play the Austin Major. You know, it doesn't feel right.
I think is most likely going to be the case. I think like
Yeah.
from at least what like the lack of what we've heard. Like I think if there was a world in which he was going to be playing the major, we would have heard like the like Anita like these rumor mill kind of things of like, oh, this person's inquired or he's been spotted pracking with said team or yada yada. And I think they're leaving it too late to make a change like that if they want the team to be kind of really you at least want to have like one or two like S tier or at least two probably like S tier tournaments under your belt before heading in towards the Austin Major with him at the helm. So I think unfortunately it's just going to be the classic thing of Austin Major finishes and then Roster Mania happens in the summer, and that's when, without a doubt, he has to be picked up. There's no way this guy is just like sat on the sidelines for longer than half a year. But I just think that the unfortunate timing of when he gets dropped as the circuit started, giving not enough time for teams to incorporate. Maybe things change. Maybe teams like for example, like have like one or two bad tournaments like soon, and they're like, okay, fuck this, something's got to change immediately before Austin. But I can't see a world in which which he gets put onto a team prior to the Austin Major. As sad as it is to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, again, you have to consider maybe like how the announcement for Siuhy came through. Like, not all of us were surprised. There was no
Yeah.
rumors about that whatsoever. So maybe that's exactly how it continues with his side of the Counter-Strike scene. Maybe there actually won't be any rumors and it'll suddenly pop up with a roster change. But I agree, you'd think we'd hear something about it. Like again, like I think if there was one team that he'd improve more than the other, G2 already at a decent level, just have that cap with Snacks.
Sure.
Liquid, he would improve more for me because it takes the mantle off of Twists. The question mark will beef up with Ultimate. How do you upgrade him in the future? Liquid, simple. Welcome back to 2016. I'm joking. Don't hurt me. But yeah, like JKS is the issue with him being not doing the role that he technically should be doing right now. Like he's being forced into uncomfortable situations. And it feels like the Liquid roster is a bit of a mess like that. You've got Nerds now, who is a great person to build around with a Twist and a NAF. So yeah, I would be very sad if Siuhy isn't around for the Austin Major. But it genuinely, like you say, teams are scared of changing a system and bringing in an IGL to completely change that system and losing significant VRS points. I don't think there's any risk for a team like G2, for example, but maybe there's more risk for a team like Liquid. I'm not so sure, but it's just a shame, and I want to see him play again. I want to see. We saw what he could do with Gamer Legion of all teams. Like, they made a bloody major final. It's not like he only works in a Mao system. He can work with A Core and fucking Kios, right? Like, it's doable.
Yeah, if you can do it with A Core and Kios, you can do it with anybody. I think is kind of the thing. But I don't know. I really can't see a world in which he gets picked up prior to Austin. As sad as it is to say, I know he's not good. The only thing with the Liquid one is like, yes, if he does, like, who is going to AWP on that team? If I'm assuming the move is what I've kind of seen. I don't know if you guys agree. It's like Manus Ultimate plus Siuhy calls, but then are we just going to play the no warping? Because we had a couple of teams try this whole no warping thing and it didn't exactly work. Or then we're going to force a rifler to then AWP, which we've also seen in the past doesn't kind of work long term.
Yeah.
Is anybody on that
Look,
team?
man, I've seen a team win a Grand Slam doing that. you know.
True, but it's just one of those like I don't know if in this day and age if you can have like as much as minus ultimate I'm there for plus whoever I don't care, but it's just a case of like in this situation who is going to be like the not primary AWP because there isn't going to be one, but who's going to be the one who picks
Yeah.
it up when they do, right? Is it then going to be like
So
twists going into it, which I don't know if you want to be
I
doing
would
that.
say so. So Naf is secondary op before, like
Yeah, but
pretty
does he
often.
want a
So
primary is the big thing. I don't think he'd want to.
yeah, I think it'd be a completely different scenario, right? It's a huge risk, right? Don't get me wrong. I think I would go for JKS and I would leave Ultimate as is if I had to make a Liquid move there,
Yeah.
just
What
because.
what if they make Twists Orp like because he's secondaried on Misfits in 2017? How about that?
I think that guy has got the mechanics to make any weapon work. Like that dude is
True.
just
Oh
like
yeah, I know for
so.
sure.
He's
But
so criminally like
it
gifted. It's ridiculous.
it would be hilarious if he started AWPing after like he kicked or I didn't like Cadian AWPing calling, like at one point as well. Like because but one thing we hadn't touched on is actually that Zeus interview. Like how much
Yeah.
shit was mentioned from obviously one side of the story. Always have to preface that, but like so many things about Twist just like hating certain situations, wanting to going to talk with the phase guys rather than spending time with the liquid guys and all this sort of thing, right? Like
Dude,
so many
those
stories
that
going down
basketball
there.
game stuff was insane, man.
I
I've never
know.
heard anything
I
like
mean,
that in my life.
it
That's
also came
crazy.
out like I forget the guy's name now, but one of the Liquid like owners, or whatever, was like he was not on.
Nazgul.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was not on company money, which,
Mm.
Right. Yeah.
I think I don't know. I mean, this is
Yeah.
something we
I mean,
can touch on a little bit.
game's
That
phase,
Zeus
right?
interview, by the way, just I don't
We
know
should,
why.
Yeah.
we should, yeah.
That we were kind of talking earlier. What drama can we touch on? How could we forget about that banger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot came out in that. A lot of which was actually kind of some of which was I think known. Maybe like maybe it's just us who work in the industry a lot that we like knew about it, but like I don't think it's uncommon knowledge that Twist has had his issues with Elige. I would like to say I think that's pretty relatively common knowledge. There was some hilarious knowledge turning down Donk, moron. But then again, like would that have actually worked? We can talk about the semantics of it, but that is a hilarious like hindsight thing of
I
like,
mean, you make that work, man. You make
hey,
that work.
exactly,
It's
exactly.
not.
I think it's so funny to me of like, no, I don't want to play with this kid, and then it's like, what 7 months to a year later, he's like the best player to touch Counter-Strike 2. And probably one of the best riflers we've seen I mean, he's easily one of the best riflers we've seen in the last 5 years, without a shadow of a doubt. So like, it's just hilarious to the hindsight of it, but I don't, would it have actually worked? We can kind of joke about that a later date. But some of the things that came out in that, like, first of all, I'm
Do you
assuming
want the link? I've got it.
I'm assuming that's Zeus never working as a coach again. First of all, like there's normally like details you kind of like just don't really see get published. I'll bring it up here. So, here we go. So, Twist is a bad IGL. Liquid should get Siuhy instead of Ultimate. It was first of all, for those who haven't seen it, go and watch the Snake and Manta episode. It's actually fantastic. It's a very good episode.
Yeah.
I think I would actually say, as much as most of them are bangers, especially mine. Go and watch that one. But but I think this one is probably
And mine. Hey, come on
yeah,
now.
and yours. Yeah, you'll give it. But I think this is probably one of the best. I would say, like, just not only in terms of like it was a great episode to watch, but like just the bombshells that were dropped too.
Yeah, I'm surprised that he wanted to do this.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
it was funny because I'm pretty sure like the way that in the episode that it's structured, it's like they weren't expecting him
No.
to go down this road because the point is like he doesn't believe that Twist could be a good IGL. Was the bad point, and then he just kind of like spilled into just everything about the team. But it's kind of insane, just like how the whole Cadian thing worked on this team. I've heard a lot about his calling style and how it just didn't really work. Like there was apparently just not even a playbook in preparations when they had Skulls and Cadian on the team, and just the way that they dealt with that whole situation and how they dealt with conflict between players was really poor, and that to me is just like it's very upsetting because I don't know if you guys remember, but they did that whole retreat thing when they first announced the roster.
Was it with Mind
And-
Esports?
Yeah, and that just makes me so sad that like you put all this focus on the mental aspect of the game
Mm.
and what you got to do to be a team and how to become a leader and all this BS, right? And the reason why I'm saying is BS because it didn't actually translate to anything. The reason why this team fell apart was purely due to conflict and how they handled conflict. It was very poor, right? So I don't know. It's just upsetting because I don't think Zeus is in the right. I don't think Skulls is in the right. I don't think Katie's right. I don't think Twist is in the right.
Mm.
I don't think there's any good actors in this scenario. It's really upsetting to see players still show this level of immaturity for something that I think at face value, you look at this team. This team was supposed to win a lot. I
Yeah.
think that's pretty safe to say. When you look at how Skulls was supposed to be before he came onto this team, when you look at the work that Katie had done previously, and what the core of
Yeah.
Liquid previously had already done, this was a no-brainer. This team should have won things,
Yeah.
and they didn't. And the fact that they couldn't put that kind of those issues aside and resolve conflicts accordingly is just embarrassing. Really, it's just embarrassing for this organization.
Yeah, it's also been funny. Just like I was just reading a little bit of the comments on HTV, but like in general, like on Twitter and stuff, the kind of like the slight uproar that it caused around this. Yeah, I mean, some of it I feel like it has been known about kind of Twist's like interpersonal issues. I mean, I don't think that was that, at least it wasn't to me, like it wasn't like a shock, but some of the things that come around it. But then, at the same time, I think it's very much it's a he says she says type thing, or I guess in this like he says type thing, where it's like, whose opinion do you actually like value? Because you got Nazgul on the other side saying, most of this is incorrect, it's not true. um you know we're disappointed that he said this because a lot of it's like false, or like it's inflammatory, kind
Mm-hmm.
of without kind of the backing, and this and the other. So you have to take all of these with a pinch of salt, because I think obviously, without a doubt, I mean, Zeus, kind of basically admitted that he was pretty salty about being kicked, and it very much feels like it's like, okay, I'm annoyed, so I'm going to get this off my chest. In his opinion, there's a great sort of Chinese proverb. There's three sides to the truth: your word, their
Yeah.
word, and the truth, right? And
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the case here, right? I think it's very much like, you got one side of Zeus saying this thing, you got the org of Liquid saying the other thing, and then there's probably a middle ground, which is where the truth is. But for me, that's I don't know why, for Zeus, I'm assuming by doing that, it's sort of also kind of a thing of saying I'm not going to be coaching anymore. Cause I don't really see teams wanting to kind of pick up that, like, somebody who's gonna kind of spill the beans in a way. It's not always something that happens that much in esports.
Yeah,
I
I'd agree with
wouldn't
that. Go
I,
ahead, Nick.
I
I think.
wouldn't I wouldn't want to either. I think that is a risk, but I do also think that in a way it's important to have things like this happen because I also don't want it to be the inverse scenario where everybody just keeps mum and we all just try to
Yeah.
sing kumbaya and think that nothing bad happens in the scene. Like there are bad things that happen
Mm-hmm.
and I would like for people to learn from this. Like I want people to realize like we can avoid this from happening again. Like
Yeah.
if we want to assemble a team like this, it's possible, and there are ways to get around this
Agreed.
problem, right? And so maybe you don't have to hire Zeus again. That is what it is. I think he could still totally have a space in like Brazilian teams, and it could still be fine. But
Mm-hmm.
um, it's clear that like we need smarter coaches from a leadership perspective. That was one thing that I noticed is that like yes, you might not necessarily need a coach for a strategic part. That's what that he mentioned that he was brought into the team to deal with the personalities and not
Yeah.
necessarily to deal with the calling aspect of it. And he didn't do that. So I think that that's something that you got to look at and say, okay, can these guys improve in that regard and kind of try to wrangle these guys together. More importantly, so yeah, a lot to say about coaching, a lot to say about these orgs trying to deal with these kind of scenarios as well moving forward. So yeah, I mean, it's embarrassing to say all these things, I'm sure from his end, but I think it's still important that he did get these words out there.
Yeah, I like that we're getting information. I mean, drama in
Yeah,
this sense, I can get behind, right? So
it's
that's,
awesome.
yeah, exactly that. Final thing we want to touch on, unless you want to touch on anything more there, Trav. But
No, I'm good. Can
if
carry
good,
on. Yeah.
I think we'll do the last but not least is about VRS. It's a very, very interesting conversation. I think that we've all seen, or at least heard from, and we've had kind of now where there's been an open letter about VRS, and I think understandably so. I could read it all out now, or I could send people. It is pretty long, but if you want, I'll read it all out. Why not? Because it's pretty important stuff.
Reading practice. Go ahead, dear.
Yeah, exactly.
Get it
I'm
done.
assuming it's all these parts that I need to read, just in the quotation marks. I'm just looking through it now. But first of all, the teams that signed this letter: NIP, Metasport, Endpoint, Yano, Ents, Maus, Big, Harvu, Eyeballers, Imperial, Legacy, Falcons, OG, 3D Max, 90, Furia, M80, Monty, Fnatic, Game Legion 9, Aurora. It's some actually big orgs in there, but not the biggest is probably the way I would put it. And understandably so. But let me read this out anyway. Dear Valve, we all share your vision of quote unquote a level playing field where every team and player has the opportunity to qualify for a major based on skill alone. We appreciate your efforts to reshape the tournament landscape, but we believe the current system has significant flaws that are undermining this vision. As a collective, we offer this feedback to help strengthen the foundations you built. First, open qualifiers, the only way to enter the scene through Tier 1. As it stands, if you have a core without VRS points, open qualifiers are the only way of getting points. For tournament organizers, open qualifiers are a major undertaking simply due to scale. Running 512 to 1,024 team brackets requires a sizable logistical and administrative workload to ensure competitive integrity, meaning only the biggest TOs are able to organize these effectively. This creates a layered ecosystem. The biggest tournaments offer a small chance at a dream open qualifier run that catapults teams to relevance, while the tier below runs on invites only. Below that tier is a dead zone, where teams slowly run out of oxygen while waiting for the next tier 1 open qualifier. As a result, any new and up-and-coming team can only enter the ranking, paradoxically, through tier 1 events, and these are few and far between. Unless the ranking system changes, there must be stronger incentives for smaller TOs to run open qualifiers. Backpedaling on decisions. The status of tournament's VRS license needs to be settled before the tournament starts. We are only 1 month into the year, and multiple tournaments have had their VRS status revoked mid-tournament, while others have had theirs added mid-tournament. This uncertainty has major implications for teams and players due to how precarious this situation is in Tier 2. Committing to the wrong tournaments could result in a long stint in a dead zone. From a team's perspective, it is crucial that these licenses are not given out on a whim. Communication and complexity. Credit where credit is due. Making the code base open source has given everyone the opportunity to fully grasp the inner workings of the ranking, allowing us to fully understand the effect of every single match. However, the esports industry gathers people from all walks of life with a great variety in technical knowledge and work-life experiences. Presenting this crucial information on a GitHub repository written in a very technical way negatively affects accessibility for smaller teams and players who lack the technical fluency to dissect this model. If players cannot understand the steps needed to climb the rankings, or if a TO does not understand whether their tournament fulfills the license requirements, there needs to be a centralized forum/platform where questions are asked and answered. We understand that there is a cost to building and maintaining such a platform, and are open to working with a third party to do so. Currently, the scene is coping with a lack of clarity by sharing this information in what has become a global name of telephone, where at times teams are educating TOs on the current interpretation of the rules, mostly operating completely in the dark. Valve, you made the bold decision to reshape the Counter-Strike ecosystem, but the system as it stands is not a level playing field. To get there, you have to finish what you have started. From your perspective, this might just be a time period where you're accepting flaws in the system until it irons itself out. To us, the teams, this time period could kill our Counter-Strike organizations. To leave you with a short-term suggestion, that would help us out. Add open qualifiers to the major again. Allow all teams players the chance to save their careers and dreams. Boom, boom. That was the first time I've read a paragraph or a thing that long in a while. But
Congrats, well done.
Yeah, I think I did okay.
You did well.
And also since then, Paravision and Amcal have said they agree with the points in the document, as put in the HTV
and
article here.
Just to add, You may notice none of the top teams have signed it.
Hmm. And I think this is probably the first brilliant talking point about this is understandably so. It
Yeah,
is a top heavy. I mean, the VR system is ultimately flawed, right, in so many ways. But where it's not flawed for is if you're already at the top, you have zero incentive to want fairy tale runs or to want these sort of open qualifiers and this, that, and the other. You want it to be top heavy, and because you're already part of that system, it's only, for example, when we see teams inevitably kind of drop out of this, direct invites to teams, that's when I'm going to be seeing them probably quote retweeting this open letter being like, yeah, no, I agree actually. But for now, while you're part of the elite, you're part of that 1% of the Counter-Strike ecosystem where you're getting all these big invites, there's no incentive for you to co-sign this. You don't want to put pressure on what is already a bit of a gold mine for you at the moment, and a gold mine where you don't have that many risks. So it's rough, right? I think is the thing. I don't see a world in which it has to come from Valve, obviously, but there's I don't see a world in which tier one teams are going to put pressure on Valve because it's not in their best interest to do so.
But I do think that with the number of teams that have reached out, and just with I think the community uproar in general, which it's definitely there. I have to say that I think as far as Valve go in terms of listening, I think they're listening more than they ever have, and their reactions to things are much more immediate. So my assumption is that everything to do with like Austin is like done. Like there's nothing gonna happen. Nothing's gonna change in the next few months, right? I'm talking like the second half of 2025 and moving into 2026, making it a little easier for these teams to have a bit more of a leapfrog moment. But I think that having letters like this are super important. If only we had like a players association or something that could help us do something like this or something like that. I don't know. You can talk about the CSPPA and shit like that, and would love to have something like that. But we can't all have that, I guess. But these are the kinds of situations that would help fix that scenario. And honestly, it's kind of a bummer that there's just that we're in this position in the first place. That we've got to have a divide between tier one and
Yeah.
tier two. Like, I think both kind of work in harmony, and you get a lot of really cool stories in tier one because of tier two. And I think tier two is the reason why tier one teams get pushed to the limit. That's why we had the Paris playoff thing that we had,
Yeah.
right? Like, why do we have ITB? Why do we have GL there? Because we had a
yeah,
lot of these partner teams kind of sitting on their ass and not getting, not really pushing the envelope of how to play the game. And you notice that a lot of these teams that had their nose to the grindstone showcase that there is a lot of work that these tier one teams also have to put in. It's not a cakewalk. It should not be just these pro players that are able to sign a contract and just make free money out
Mm-hmm.
of nowhere. There's got to be a little bit of competition to it. So it goes both ways. Like you can't have one without the other. And I think this esport will get incredibly dry if we lose tier two because
Yeah.
um we spoke about it from a talent perspective, but I think more importantly from a team perspective, you're not gonna have a Copenhagen Flames, you're not gonna have an Entropic, you're not gonna have like an ITB, a Gamer Legion. These stories would not be there, and I think they're still incredibly important to our story
Yeah.
as an esport and in our history. It really does make a big difference into how we look at the esport from a narrative perspective. And if you don't have that going, I think we're in a really deep hole. And it'll be fun. The viewership numbers will be up. You'll see your favorite teams play against each other in the big playoff stages, and that'll still be great. And I think that what they figured out for that is good. Like, don't get me wrong. I think this VRS concept is a good thing, but you've got to get the other half of it going as well. You've got to
yeah,
have these other teams have a possibility to just make a team from scratch. I think it's crazy that NIP can make a good team as it is and now struggle. I mean, granted, they're not winning. I think there's a little bit of a caveat to that. They're just not able to
yeah,
win on one hand. But on the other hand, the matches that they are able to win aren't really necessarily making any sort of a dent in their improvement as a ranking. So the fact that that is not able to happen, that teams just have to buy out cores, that shouldn't be a thing either. Like being able to just buy out cores and just get a VRS like ranking point, that being the smart thing to do, I think is not. I don't really like that.
Yeah, like
But that might just be a personal thing.
and buying out cores does eventually screw one org.
Yeah,
Like, Falcons had to buy Heroic's core. Heroic had to buy Sangal's core. Sangal have to put together a team with Calix, Danists. Like,
yeah,
there's a wild mix of players, which is not going to get in, any invites to anything because they've got no points whatsoever. So, yeah, I don't like. That's one of the main things that is rough about it. But also at the same time, while we want open qualifiers for everything, it's also just not feasible to run an open qualifier circuit for every single tournament over a calendar year.
yeah,
There's just no room. If
Yeah.
we're actually gonna have a circuit that has all these tier one events overlapping with each other and like being so close together with like two day gaps, like if we could remove one event in the middle and get a gap where maybe open qualifiers could be played, sure. But no TO is going to do that in their best interest, are they? They're going to want their big event with the big prize pool, with the big teams, every given opportunity to get the biggest viewership and fans in an arena. So
yeah,
it's rough. Uh, Things can be tweaked, and actually, I don't think it's as doom and gloom as people have made it out to be. There's definitely some genuine issues which are very obvious, but they will get sorted, as Neo says, probably post Austin. That will create new things. That will create new problems. But I think Valve are more aware and read more about it than perhaps people realize because they're so like radio silent about this sort
yeah,
of shit. Like people think, oh, they just don't care. They're watching it burn to the ground right now. But I think any sane person, will look at it and say, listen, tier two is just as important. And as much as we want and wish Valve to hire someone like Messioso, who seems to know everything, just to fix it all, like
yeah,
again, that's not reality. So it's not awful. It's not like it's ruined the scene. It can be changed again. It's not a permanent
yeah,
difference.
I think it's not necessarily that. Yeah, I think you're right. It's not ruin the scene, but I think it can ruin the scene. Is my
yes,
issue is
In
yeah,
that
time. Yeah.
if we keep this up and we keep like neglecting the tier two scene, it will become a problem, and eventually you'll realize how in the hell can I upgrade a team and take a chance on a newer player if there aren't any new teams that are being able to kind of grind through the scene and prove
yeah,
themselves that they're ready to be in the top levels. So there is just an inherent problem with even the tier one players. Like eventually they're gonna need to make a change. There's gonna have to be an upgrade somewhere. And yes, you've got players like Kyosuke or Makaze and stuff like that, but like eventually you're gonna run out of those options. Like there's just not gonna be any options.
yeah. I agreed. I think as well. I mean, one of the things, just like in general online shit talk that CS has been doing, we've always flexed how good our tier two scene is. It's always been like a running thing, especially
Yeah.
to other esports. It's always been like, yeah, but you guys only have like 5 tournaments a year, and then you don't you have no tier two, so you have nothing else going on. And we've always been able to kind of say like, we have an incredibly solid tier two circuit. And even on the flip side, in terms of like, for us, you can live off being in tier two and just casting that. And same with players, right? There's so many tournaments are available, but ultimately it's going to get to a point where that's not going to be the case. And we're seeing sort of historic orgs drop out one by one, and especially as the longer this sort of VRS system is in place, the more it's happening. And of course, obviously, most notably, recently was out of Endpoint, right? Endpoint have always been a profitable organization, and they came out and just said like, this is not feasible. We cannot make. There's no way we can talk about playing at a level which is worth any sort of money at the moment until the system changes. That's it. And it's sad to lose orgs like Endpoint, who've in the past always been profitable, has been such a stalwart of Counter Strike in kind of the region and in the scene in tier two. They've always just been like a team that's always been around. And sure, performances have been rough for a while, but they still have some good moments in the past with things like trying to push for RMRs, their Pro League stint, beating Navi, all of this, that, and the other. So it is sad. Valve, I'm sure, would have seen this. I just don't know what their next steps are. But I mean, I'm kind of, personally, I guess, co-signing their letter in a way and saying like, I do agree. I think things have got to change. Like, you can't have a circuit at the moment which is as top heavy as it is, which is going to give no room for move up. And I think in particular, you look at kind of like the other side where it's like, if you are a team that is, a new core or unranked or whatever, how do you ever even fathom getting even it's like a CCT. Like, how are you actually even going to get those invites? Because a lot of those teams in there are like top 30 teams that are taking those invites. So like, if you're like a team
in the
ranked,
play-ins.
yeah, you're in the play-ins, and
Yeah.
you've got teams that and then it's brutal, man. And I can't imagine like what the thought process is, and hence why a lot of teams are shutting down. So it's rough. I hope something changes. Again, I think a lot of these things, if they are going to change, it would have to be post Austin. I think we're kind of too committed now. But ultimately, kind of a rough spot nonetheless. But I
think like the two things with that is very simply, if you want to survive, you kind of have to have significant backing or be a gambling company org, maybe. That's probably literally all you have to have. And yeah, like I think it's Ash brought it up on one of the round table podcasts he did at Katowice. I think it was with Mitha and Saw and Harry, maybe. Yeah, like the CCT play-ins before were academy teams and ESEA advanced teams trying to see what they can do at a higher level to practice, pretty much.
Yeah.
If they can apply their trade. They came through some qualifiers usually to do that. Now it's literally, because they're having to use VRS, we're getting Aurora and NIP and fucking Fireflux, like all these teams that just shouldn't be there at that high, at that lower level, they're there. So yeah, it is pretty crazy, and that sort of thing is probably going to have to change in the future, but it can. Like as Annie says, in time, if nothing changes, it will get a lot worse. But things will change. I have no doubt about that.
I think they have to as well. I think Valve will see. I'm assuming the slightly dying tier 2 and realize that this is a bit of an issue. But I think as with most things, fellas, I think it's a bit of a waiting game. I think is probably how it is.
Yeah.
We can conclude there and finish off as we always do. What have we got coming up? What is the next, let's say, month or so looking like? Paladin, what have you got for us? What's coming up?
It's a pretty rough month, I guess. There's just not much going on really. I mean, ECL is obviously still in full swing, so we'll be on that for both SA and NA. So keep an eye out for that. Just had a rescope video out recently, so definitely check that one out. Pretty proud of that one. Probably will have one maybe post Austin, I'd like to think. So that's probably in the way future. But YouTube video still brainstorming some stuff, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, other than that, I think Fragadelphia is happening in a couple of weeks, so we'll be down there for that. So any North American viewers that are around there, if you want to come say hi, I will be there. And yeah, that's pretty much it, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah.
What you got?
For the next month for me, it's pretty much just bits and pieces for Compass or for CCT, doing some hosting. Some analyst work for that. Next week, I'm going to be going to the F1 Live 75 launch show. My goat Hazold, shout out Harry. He sorted me out a little seat to watch that. Formula One is something I've loved since I was like 11, 12 years old. So the fact that I'm going to an event like that, which could be very decent seats, and seeing all the drivers, even if they don't want to be there, it's a bit of a weird launch show. But still, I'm really looking forward to it, and it should be a bit of a fun day. But other than that, yeah, just doing some more online work. Probably going to try and do some co-streaming. I'm waiting for PGL to. I think other people are in the same boat as me. Waiting to figure out if they've approved me for co-streaming for PGL Cluj. I will definitely be streaming it if I do get approved for it. And yeah, I think actually that's pretty much it for now. I want to just can we end the podcast? I just saw this. I completely missed this on it was like 4 days ago. But you've got to show this on I just saw this very briefly. You've got to show this on the podcast before we sign off. It's only like 5 seconds.
I'll open it now. Is this the Doritos thing?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't see this until today.
Let me bring this one up. Will this play? I think it will play with audio. I'm pretty sure. Let's have a look. I don't want to be too loud. There we go.
It's so funny.
Championships, right? And that's why the roster change was made. Even though they were able to win Cologne last year, that wasn't enough for them. One championship level event. They want to go.
Remember when Stunner like stopped that guy from charging at the camera, one of the old events back in the day. That is just so funny, reminiscent of that. And yeah, I had to get that up because it was. I just saw that while we were talking.
Oh, somebody did post a clip of Stunner the bodyguard.
Yeah, the famous one.
I'll link this for you guys, but I'll play this one as just like a little throwback as well. Let's see.
Classic. The sound in it is so funny as well.
Why is my YouTube crashed? Good time for it to fucking die. Here we go. Wait, I guess we'll
Benson,
wait.
one of the most
Here we
vocal
go.
SK fans in this entire arena all day
Incredible.
long. How does
Incredible
it feel knowing
video.
your team is going to the finals?
Thank you for asking me. First of all, I would like to congratulations for the enemy team, Face Clan. They were really hard. It was a good feeling for us, and I would like to thank. I would like to thank all of the people who supported with us. It was
Wow.
wonderful.
Just so
With
good,
that
man.
being said,
One
definitely-
hand just shut it down. Get this shit out of here.
Good memories. Good memories, man.
I love it. That's
Good stuff.
it's a great handoff there. I love that. Just
Yeah,
get
I
that.
thought it might be a good idea. Remember, I used to do like clip of the week
Yeah.
back in our older
True.
podcast, right? I need to bring that back. I think that's a little taster maybe of what I've got in the future. Who knows?
Just me and stiff arm there from Stunner. But
Yeah.
yeah. For me, same as you guys are kind of saying, a bit of online work, do some CCT this week and next week, and I've got like one day I think of ESL Challenger League towards the end of the month. But yeah, for the most part, we're kind of just grinding some of the online work. We'll be doing the videos. I'm trying to do like roughly around one a week, not including the podcast. So roughly around one a week is sort of what I'm aiming for. So there'll be more content coming up on the YouTube channel, and we'll be doing another one of these probably. I'm trying to think what's the next time. Maybe not post Cluj, but maybe
Pre-pro league. There's a bit of a gap
Yeah,
between the two.
I can say that's probably a decent time actually, because then at
Yeah.
that point we can also do like pre-pro league and then Blast Lisbon as well. Kind of just sort of put them both in a way sort of together. But yeah, that'll be probably the next time we do a podcast. But of course, as always, go and check out the fellas. You see the rats on screen. You also will be able to see the links down below. Nice and simple. Until next time, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. If you're watching us on Twitch, go, follow on YouTube or whatever the fuck, and vice versa. But yeah,
And remember to turn the volume up on your device if it's too quiet.
there we go. Nice and easy. Until next time, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. See you soon.
Bye.